G'day folks, and welcome to this example of play of Imperial Struggle. This is a game designed by Naval Spaces and Jason Matthews, published by GMT Games. This is the second printing by GMT, which corrects a lot of the errata that we saw in the first printing. This, of course, is widely regarded as the successor, in a sense, to Twilight Struggle. This focuses on the Cold War. It was published many years ago. I've seen several different editions and printings over the years. This is my deluxe edition 7th printing from 2019. This is one of my most played games. I've played Twilight Struggle about 150 times. It's a solid game. It's not one of my top games, probably because I've played it so much and it's a bit tiring in a sense because I've played it so often. But when Imperial Struggle came out, and everyone was saying, well, it adopts a similar system to Twilight Struggle, my initial response was, well, I don't need more of this. I'm happy with what I've got here. And I didn't initially pick up Imperial Struggle. It took me a couple of years. Until last year, in fact, when the second printing came out and they corrected that errata. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And so I bought it, sat on the shelf for a while. Finally, at the start of this year, 2022, some friends said, let's give it a go. Read through the rules, and first play, it blew me away. Just how much better this is than Twilight Struggle. Whereas Twilight Struggle is a card-driven game, much like Paths of Glory or Here I Stand or the like, this has elements of that, but it's a very different system. It's almost a sort of action tile selection driven system, which I'll sort of talk about in this example. These are the tiles over here. They're called investment tiles. And you select these tiles to take actions, to basically perform, to use the kind of actions on these tiles to perform actions on the board. It's very different to the card-driven system of Twilight Struggle. So whilst there's this same underlying kind of feel to it, it plays out different and better, I want to argue. There's this common pool of investment tiles, which I'll show in a moment, and the player with the initiative selects one of these tiles, performs their action, it goes over to the other player. They select a tile, perform their action. So you're drawing from this sort of common pool of tiles. There are cards in the game, but it's more card facilitated. You could potentially go a whole game without playing a card. Unlikely, because the cards kind of add nice little bonuses, but they're not essential. They are not necessarily needed. They're more kind of supplementary, card sort of supplemented to the core gameplay, which I'll talk about in a moment. So yes, my impressions of Imperial Struggle have been surpassed. I expected something closely in gameplay to Twilight Struggle, and really it blew me away. It focuses, of course, on the rivalry between Britain and France in the 17th and 18th century, mainly the 18th century, mid to late 18th century. This is the map, and it is divided into four key areas. There's a lot to talk about with this game. So, yeah, 4 key areas, and each of those areas is divided into different types of areas. I guess we could say. We've got Europe, for example. If you look up here, Europe is mainly divided into political spaces. Now, political spaces are diamond spaces. They represent established political entities. Places like Ireland, Scotland, the Dutch Republic, Savoy, Sardinia, Austria, and so forth, and regions within, areas within those established political entities. So Europe is mainly, in fact, mainly those political spaces representing, I guess, the kingdoms, empires that existed at the time. There are some political entities in the kind of Indian sub-region, they're called. Region, sorry. There are, for example, Mangalore, Mysore, Maratha, and so forth. The Caribbean, it has some political entities, buccaneers, privateers. You can see those diamond shapes there. In addition to those political spaces, there are market spaces. And these are the circles. So you'll see this here. We have sugar markets, all these little circles down here with the little sugar icon. We have tobacco market spaces, all these circles with tobacco. Further north, there's the fur market spaces. There's the fish market spaces. Over in India, we've got cotton market spaces and spice market spaces, and all these connections in between. These are all generally tied back to territories, which are the big square. And think of territories as single spaces that represent sort of vast regions on the board as a base for operations throughout these different regions. And control of those territories is very important because markets effectively draw their supply back to those territories. There are also naval spaces, which are these hexagonal space things, and they tend to change hands quite a lot. They are fairly, all spaces change hands, but naval spaces seem to be quite fickle. It's easy to kick opposing fleets or navies out of those naval spaces. We also have, so these are the naval spaces, similar in appearance are the forts. So the Ohio Forks up here, Champlain Valley, Halifax, Louisbourg. They are more secure, far more secure. Same shape, serve a similar purpose, but tend to be more secure. Once somebody grabs control of those forts, it's hard to take them away. There are lines of connection, of course, so you, like in Twilight Struggle, you build chains of control and effect from one area out to the other. Again, these are drawn back typically to your territories or forts or naval spaces as sort of the basis for supply, in a sense. And they go along these lines. In addition to those lines of communication are conquest lines. These dotted lines here, these aren't used quite as frequently. They're only really used if you gain conquer points in a war and you get to spend those conquer points to take control of territories. When you do that, you follow these conquer lines to see where or what is available, basically. So if the French gain a conquest point in the Caribbean, they can follow those lines to conquer basically a connected territory. You'll note at the start of the game, it's a pretty easy game to set up. This is set up, and I've taken a few steps as well. You basically place all these little flags. Blue flag on blue represents French control. Red flag on red represents British control. This is the starting setup at the start of the game. We always use the optional rule for the Spanish control of this area around here. It just kind of creates a bit of an interference between the two players and makes things a little interesting. Now, unlike Twilight Struggle, a space is either controlled by the French, uncontrolled, or controlled by the British. There's no... Where there's Twilight Struggle, you can accumulate control, have 2, 3, 4 points of control. In this, it's just the 1 point. So it shifts between 3 different states, basically. If the French want to gain control of Puerto Rico, they would simply, by their actions and expenditure of points, place a flag there. They can't add to that, so you'll never add a second French flag or anything like that. Instead, the British can remove that flag, or they can switch it to British control via various actions. Okay, so a space is typically in one of those 3 states, regardless of whether it is political, mercantile, or a military space. So, let's talk about these investment tiles. So at the start of the game, we shuffle these tiles and we draw out 9 new tiles. And this basically kind of, as these come out, both players will want to study these tiles to get a sense of what type of actions, what type of activity basically they want to do during the course of this turn. I'll take a break from that in a moment. I'll point out that there are effectively 6 turns in the game, and these turns are occasionally interspersed with wars. So at the start of the game, we play 1 peace turn. We'll be rushing to get everything out on the board, and then we'll resolve the War of Spanish Succession. Very little is actually done when these wars are resolved. You're basically, in terms of actions taken, you're really just resolving the conflict on this war board shown down here. You basically work out who has the most points in each of the 4 different theatres of war, and the person with the most points, based on their margin of victory for those points, gets victory points or conquest points or some other benefit, and the loser will get often some consolation benefit, like a treaty point. I'll explain what these are in a moment. Fundamentally, this is a game where you're trying to secure victory points, and here's the victory point track over here. It starts at 15. In pretty much every game we've played thus far, the French rush ahead, and it's really early game. The British are trying to contain the French and trying to stop the French from gaining an automatic victory. If the French can end a turn, or if we get to the victory check phase and they are on 30 or more, it's an automatic French victory. In the games we've played thus far, the French are always in this region here, pushing towards that victory. It's always the case for the British early game to try and reel them back. And we have found that as the sort of game wears on to turn 4, 5, 6, the British gradually manage to pull that back, and it becomes this tussle around the middle by the final few turns. So yeah, I think we've come to expect an early French dominance for various reasons, with a late British comeback. That tends to be the narrative that we see in our game. Maybe it's just the way we play, maybe it's the strategies that we're employing. Curious to hear what other people think about early French dominance in these wars and those desperate attempts for the British to just deny them those few extra victory points. So yeah, you're trying to win victory points, and you'll do that through various means on the game board. You do that through winning these wars. You do that through card play. Some cards will give you victory points for certain effects, and you'll do that through dominance of global demands. This little area up here, and the global demand markers, which are just off to the right here, which I'll explain in a moment. This is kind of a broad administrative area. You can see all these administrative markers off to the right, which may come up through event play, or through wars, or various other effects as well. Okay, so as I said, I've kind of mostly set this game up, and the sequence of play is pretty clear. We're on a peace turn, so we follow the peace turn sequence of play. We shuffle the Empire era into a draw pile, which I have done over here. Sorry, that's on turns 3 and 5 out. We shuffle there's 3 decks in the game. We have Succession era, we have Revolution era, and we have Empire era, represented by the colours on these turns. 2 turns of each, basically. At the start of the game, we were in the Succession era, so I shuffle the Succession era events, and we are about to deal these to the players. Deck phase, turn 3 and 5 only, we can ignore that. Turn 3 and 5 only, we ignore the debt increase phase. I'll explain that later. Award phase, turn up the top award markers in each award box. So this is what I should have done as part of the setup. Basically, these are, each region is worth victory points for control, much like the continents are in Twilight Struggle. But it varies with every game you play. Where's the region box for Europe? Here it is. And for North America, it's way up there. Okay. What this means is, so there are 8 tokens. We'll have 1 for next turn. And it's variable. So Europe isn't worth much for the first turn of this game, but it may be worth 2 or 3 victory points next turn or the next game we play. So there's a lot of variability in this game, and I love that idea that every time we play this, it is different. It's a different experience. Different things happen. Different VP markers come out. There's a different focus. Different global demands come out, which I'll talk about right now, actually. The next phase is the global demand phase. We shuffle these 6 tokens up. There are 6 different global demands, the 6 different types of commodities you see on the market spaces. We draw 3 and we reveal them. Now we have a few quirks in our gameplay, which is probably slightly different to, we tend to put the global demands here. I tend to order them in order that they appear on this global demand sheet, just so they're easy to consult. So basically on this first turn, what this means is that there is a demand for fur, spice and sugar. They are the 3 resources, or rather markets, that will score. The person with the most The control of the most markets with those resources secures the benefit. And yeah, that's an easy way to get victory points. So we're looking at furs in North America, where it's 50-50 at the moment. We're looking at spice in India, where the British have an early lead with one spice market and are pretty well placed to expand that, yeah. And we're looking at sugar as well in the Caribbean. So immediately, our attention is drawn to these three theatres. We're being spread all over the place. Again, next game we play, it might be sugar, tobacco, cotton, and we may ignore North America completely. As it stands right now, both British and French attention will be on all three of these theatres for their markets. Europe is almost always a focus of attention because of the political spaces, which are always important, and the wars. So these are the 4 wars that come out. There's the War of Spanish Succession, the War of Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War, and the War of, I think it's American Independence, yeah, the last one. To get points in these wars, you'll play these war tiles, and you also get bonus points for controlling certain areas, so or achieving certain things. So, for example, for this war in Central Europe, you get bonus points for controlling Austria, Bavaria, or certain areas, I should say, in Austria, Bavaria, Denmark, Norway, and so forth. For Queen Anne's War, this is resolved in North America, and you get bonus points for conflict markers in North America. You get bonus points for forts, control of forts in North America, and bonus points for squadrons that you have placed in North America. And again, all these points are added up, and the person with the most points wins and gets the benefit depending on their margin of victory. So these war tiles will tell you your strength, and you are allowed to peek at yours. So here for the British, they've got a -1 here, but this token lets them remove basically an enemy, I think it's diplomatic space. The French start with a bonus war tile. These are basic war tiles, which are always placed. You'll always have 4, and then you can buy bonus war tiles. The French are very happy. They've got a +1, which is pretty rare among their basic war tiles, and a +3, which is very rare. So they're looking at +4, not knowing what the British have. And the British are a bit worried about this. So already the margin, we know now, it's +5 towards the French, which will give them a huge margin of victory, 3 victory points, 2 conquer points, where they can conquer some of these territories, or these additional territories around the world, and the British will get some consolation treaty points, again, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Okay, so the trade goods are out, the global demands are out. The next thing we do is reset phase, remove basically exhausted markers, move the investment markers over there. We then reveal 9 investment tiles, which I've done. We deal 3 event cards to each player. Okay, so I'm just going to play these face up so you can kind of see what we're looking at. And this is the deck, which goes over here, the draw pile. Now, let's look at the British hand for a start. And you'll notice this little symbol here. What this means is to play this event, you must select an investment tile with that icon showing as the major icon. These tiles will have 2 icons, a major icon and a minor icon. This major icon is used for your major actions, and you can use the minor icon for typically one minor action. There are these 2 tokens as well, which I'll cover in just a moment. There are 3 different types of icons on these tiles. There are military icons for military actions. These are things like fighting wars, getting your squadrons out, attacking. There are diplomatic actions, which are things like gaining control of diplomatic spaces. And there are economic actions, which are used for gaining control of market spaces, principally. The actions associated with these icons are all mostly summarized on your sheet here, and I'll cover these in just a moment. So that's basically what you'll be doing. You'll be picking these tiles, resolving the effects, adding up the points to perform actions as shown here. To use your event, you need to have that icon shown as the major action there. So if I play this tile, the little plus sign there means I can play an event. Okay, so I can't play an event with this tile. There's no plus sign, cross rather, not a plus sign. This has a cross, so I can play an event. I can play any 3 of my events, but in particular I can play this one, which requires that that major symbol. Okay, so that might be a consideration for the British. Incidentally, the French also have a card with that marker on it, so they'll also be looking at that particular event. Fortunately for the British and the French, there are two tiles with military as the major symbol with the cross on it. You'll note that this has military as a major symbol and this has military as the major symbol, but there's no cross. So these tiles, if picked, cannot be supplemented with an event. These tiles have the cross, but no military as the major symbol. So the British could pick this event to play on one of these tiles. The little symbol with a circle type of thing on these tiles, down in the bottom right, that means that you can draw a new basic war tile and replace one of your existing war tiles. Basically what you have to do here is you pick a war tile, you say, the British say, I don't like this war tile here, I'm going to draw a replacement. That is much better, I'll swap it. Okay, that's what they would love to do because that's a +2 tile. The tile that is not, so or you could say, I don't want to swap it, I'll leave the one I've got. Let's say they do swap that, they put the +2 in and they take this out. They can either put this back in their draw supply or they remove this from the game completely. And I don't really like these ones. It's a -1. It kind of works out as a net 0 in most cases, sometimes not at all. I would be inclined to remove that from the game were that sort of an action that I actually performed. So these events, they typically have a primary effect and a bonus effect if you meet certain conditions. So for example, this one here, the major effect is to unflag a market, which basically means remove a flag from a market whose removal does not isolate any other market. So the British could play this event, unflag this market. In fact, they don't want to do that because look at the demands here. Sugar, fur, spice, let's unflag the French market in Martinique. Okay, it doesn't isolate any other market. Now, as their bonus, they can get a 2 military point discount to construct a new squadron this action round. To achieve this bonus, they need to meet the prerequisites, and this is that they have finance. What does this mean? You'll see in some of these cards things like finance or bonus style or governance or style. This refers to what are called your ministry cards. One of the steps, in fact it's the next step after dealing events, is for these players to select their ministry cards. Now as part of setup, I've done that straight away. This is often the most important thing you're doing at the start of the game. You're picking your 2 ministry cards to play. These are kind of guiding your strategy for this era. So for the succession era, you've got a deck of cards that you can pick from. Succession era, you're picking cards with a little S on them. I have picked these 2 cards, and they have finance and scholarship. Finance helps me increase my debt limit by 1, and once per turn I can play an economic event even if my selected tile doesn't have the economic major action. Another one is scholarship. Once per turn I can spend 2 military points to build a squadron instead of the usual cost of 4. I find squadrons very important, so this is going to give me an early game discount on buying squadrons. Hopefully I can get a few squadrons out with this discount. These cards, in addition to their benefits, also have keywords finance and scholarship. So, because the British have selected finance, when they go to play this card, they can say, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to unflag this market, and they reveal their ministry card, and I have finance, this gives me the bonus, I'll spend 2 to construct the squadron. So you reveal these cards when they apply. The way we play this is, anytime they are relevant, you can reveal those cards, you can keep them secret. And the French have picked their cards as well, just for comparison. We'll look at what they've picked. They've gone for an Irish-Scottish strategy. They're going to fight the Jacobite rebellions, Jacobite uprisings, and they get benefits for controlling spaces in Ireland and Scotland, and they want to fight the Jacobite rebellion and put a lot of energy into that and controlling those spaces. And this John Law card also complements this. At the end of each peace turn, reduce your debt by 1 or 2 if you control any spaces in Scotland. So if they're fighting the Jacobite wars, uprisings, if they're trying to control spaces in Scotland, hopefully they meet that condition as well. It has the finance bonus, which isn't going to help them for their events. Incidentally, as I said, you can look at your cards first and then pick your ministry cards. So you could, I mean, you should ideally look at your events first, and if there's any events that you really want to play with bonus for, so the French here have 2 style. If we're following the sequence of play carefully, maybe they'll play a card that has a style, the Court of the Sun King, for example. Maybe they'd want to do that. In fact, I'm pretty sure they would want to do that with those 2 cards in their opening hand with the style prerequisites. So there's their events. That's the British events. We've picked their ministry cards. Let's just say they'll stick with that. They're going with the Jacobite strategy. We start with the initiative phase. On turn 1, the French have the initiative and they can decide who goes first. They're just going to go first. What the heck? And then we get to the core of the game, which is the action phase. Okay, this is where the fun happens. So, French turn first. What do? They look over at this investment area here and they pick a tile that they want to play. They're going to go straight out for this. Almost as soon as I say it, I'm thinking of trade demands. This is one of the great things about this game. You've got this tension, there's wars, there's your card play, there's the available investment tiles, and you've got all these market demands going on. The French want to control Ireland and Scotland, so they are going to play this card. So they're going to say, right, we are taking. Well, by the way, we should look at the rest of the French. They've got a good setup, except for this one. Yeah, we're going to take this tile here. So what we can do is the game comes with these little markers here. We can say, right, this is the French first action. Okay. Yeah, certainly. That's what we're going to do. French first action. They're going to select that tile to play. Once you've selected a tile, the first thing you have to do, it's a sort of certain order of these things. You have to play an event if you're playing an event. So they're saying, yes, we have the cross. We are playing the Great Northern War. We shift a political space in the German states. My apologies. Events are often different for British and French. So if this is a French event, we read the French half. Shift Russia. Okay, so Russia is over here. We shift it towards French influence. If it's already French flagged, blah, blah, blah. If I meet the bonus, I get 1 extra diplomacy point. I don't have style, so I ignore that. And that's now removed from the game. It's discarded. Okay, we won't see that event ever again. The discards are never shuffled back in, as far as I'm aware. Okay, the event has been played. We've got to check the bonus condition before we resolve the event first. So the first thing you do is, do I meet the bonus condition? No, then resolve the event. Now we resolve the tile's actions, and I want to resolve this military upgrade. So I'm saying, right, it's this tile here. Not really happy with that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this tile to replace. Oh, beautiful! It's a +2. So yes, I am replacing the tile, and I'm taking that one out of the game. It's no longer. I'll no longer see that bad tile that I don't want. And the French now know that they've got +2 down here for the Jacobite Rebellion, which is really good because that's where they want to spend their energy. They now have 2 military points and 2 diplomacy points. Okay, let me show you how this works. I'm going to do 2 diplomacy points first. And what I'm going to do, so I have 2 diplomacy points. I look at my summary sheet here and I can draw an event card for 3 diplomacy points. I can shift a political space by paying the space's political cost. That's about all I can do with these diplomacy points. I pretty much know what I want to do. I've got 2 points. I want to flag. I know I said Ireland and Scotland. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to flag this space here in Scotland. You'll notice that the spaces look slightly different. This space counts for wars, and it tells you in what wars they count. It's a little 1 up in the top left, means it's the first war, the War of Spanish Succession. Two dots in the top right means it's War of Austrian Succession. Spaces with 3 dots here, the Dutch Republic, this space counts towards the Third War, which is the 7 Years' War. And spaces with 4 dots in the bottom left mean they count for the Fourth War, which is the American War of Independence. So it's a great visual way to see at a glance what spaces are going to count for what wars. By controlling Scotland here, this space, I know that this space is going to count for the first 2 wars to be resolved. It's a nice one to get early. If I was aiming more long term, I might push towards the Dutch Republic. This is another really good space. It counts for the first 3 wars. But again, I'm looking for the control of spaces in Scotland and island. And those spaces will count for the wars. The other space, you'll note, it doesn't have those dots, which means it doesn't count for the wars. It does, however, count for control of Europe and for what's called the prestige bonus in Europe. You'll notice that these spaces are only in Europe, with the exception of these two, which I won't talk about right now. The player with the most prestige spaces in Europe gets a bonus to victory points. It's a nice victory point bonus, but as I said, it doesn't quite align with the French strategy is to control spaces to win the war and gain those war strengths via those kind of spaces. Okay, so that's their 2 diplomatic points. How are the French going to spend their 2 military points? Well, this is a good question. What can they do with military points? First of all, let's look down here. They can buy a bonus war tile for 2 military points. They can construct a squadron for 4. They can deploy a squadron. In fact, that might be a good way to start. Deploying squadron costs 1, 2, or 3. It costs 1 to come from the navy box to an empty space, and all you do is say, I'm spending 1 point to deploy. If, for example, the British were already there, it would cost them 3 to displace the British. If the British were there and the French were already on the map, it would cost them 2 to displace the British. Okay, so 1 to come from the box into an empty space, 2 if they're moving from the map to displace an enemy, 3 if they're coming from the naval box into a naval box to displace the enemy. 1, 2, or 3. I've really skimmed over that, but fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it. So that's one way they could spend their military points. They could also construct a fort. They're a long way from the Ohio Forks, unfortunately. Tough decision. Look, you know what? They really want this Jacobite Rebellion, so they're going to spend 2 military points to buy a bonus war tile. They take a random war tile from this bonus area. These tiles, there's 4 different groups of these tiles. You may be able to see them over here. There's a group of tiles for each of the 4 wars. What I have here is the bonus war tiles for the War of Spanish Succession. I take a tile from here and I plop it. I can actually look at this, in this case, when I'm buying a bonus war tile, I can look at it first and put it wherever I want, but I know I want it in the Jacobite Rebellion. Now, the French know they're looking really good here for the Jacobite Rebellion. +4 already. Whilst these are specific to the wars, the basic war tiles are recycled for every war. So by weeding out these bad tiles, you improve your pool of basic war tiles, and you'll see the good tiles, hopefully, come back for each of the 4 wars. That's kind of what you're aiming to do, whereas these are always sort of unique for the wars. That is the French turn done. It's now over to the British. And let's just say the British want to pursue more of a mercantile strategy. Yeah, they've got their event. They've got their cheap squadrons. But I want to go... what do I want to do? Yeah, I want to go a mercantile kind of... We'll just do an experiment here. A mercantile military tile. So this will give me 4. There's no event marker here. There's no basic war tile adjustment here. There's just 1 minor action and the major action. Now with the minor action, they've got 2 military points. You have to spend that on 1 action, and you can't use these minor actions to unflag an enemy. Okay, so I can't take anything away. It's a military action anyway, but if it was a mercantile action, I couldn't unflag a French market with that minor action. What the British are going to do is they're going to say, aha, we have Edmund Halley, and once per turn we can spend 2 military points to build a squadron. So hey, we're building up British naval supremacy. And then we're going to use our 4 mercantile points. And with the major action, again, 4 mercantile points here, economic points, I'm not sure exactly what they're called, we can split that up as much as we want. We want to increase the British fur trade. So we are going to say, okay, what's up here? Let's move into Cumberland. So chain of control from our territory in the northern colonies. It costs 2 to influence that space. We're paying 2 of our 4 to do that. What else are we going to do? Look, I know fish isn't important as yet. In fact, you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to stay in the area, stay on the fur trade, and it's going to cost us 3 to do that. you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, 2 plus 3 is 5. You've only got 4 points here. This is where we can go into debt. The British can say, we're going to go into debt 1 point to make up that 5. That meets the 5 we need, and we've got a bit of debt. We can keep taking debt up to our debt limit. And of course, once per turn, we may as well do this now, we can increase our debt limit by 1, which means the British can now take more debt. Okay, so they've done that, and what we do is we place an exhausted marker. We place it on the top of that card to show that's been performed, and again, once per turn, we place that on the top of the card to show that that action has been performed. Things that say once per turn, you put an exhausted marker on there just to show that you've effectively exhausted that action on those cards. So the British have revealed both of their ministry cards. We know what they've got, and they've started to take actions with those cards. French first turn, British first turn. They're done. Back to the French for their second turn. And yeah, that naval supremacy is a bit of a concern. Squadrons can be very important because they're very mobile. They can move around the map quite quickly and suddenly change control of areas. British are dominating the fur trade. It's going to be hard to come back from that. Okay, what do we do now as the French? Look, what do we do? What do we do? Okay, let's continue with our strategy, but we're going to pick this one now. 4 military, 2 economic. Now we can't unflag, again, the minor action, no event with this one. With the minor action of 2 economic, we can't unflag the British. We can, however, flag. Okay, there's a difference between unflagging and flagging. And we are going to flag the sugar market, because the sugar market, yeah, it's a global demand. It's going to be worth, I should point out as well, the benefits for these demands differs depending on what era you're in. We're in the succession era, so we're looking at fur, spice, and sugar in this era. So sugar worth 2 victory points, spice will be worth 1 victory point, and we lose a debt point. So maybe, in fact, yes, I'm going to shift over to India instead. I'm going to place that there to lock in this spice. We tie with the British, but it also kind of locks them out of this area. Okay, so we've kind of got our avenue through towards Calicut and Mangalore. We can extend this chain down here. That's not stopping the British. The British could send a fleet over here, which establishes a new base for supplies, and they can extend from their ship. But it'd be the extra action for the British. We just made it that much more difficult for the British to get those spices, where it's relatively easy for us. Now we have 4 military actions. 4 military actions. What are we going to do? Now again, we can break this up into different actions. So what I'm going to do is put a fleet. What am I going to do with my fleet? I might put it on the Antilles Channel just to secure my sugar trade. Okay, make it more difficult for the British to get into the sugar areas now. They'll have to displace my fleet to do so. It's just that much more difficult for them. That's 1 military point. From the Navy box to an empty space, 1 point. Fleets are important. We're going to spend 4 military points, I think. No. No, this is what I wanted to do. Sorry, let me take that back. What I wanted to do is reveal my Jacobite Uprising card and say once per turn I can use military points to shift spaces in Ireland and or Scotland. Okay, so I'm going to do that and exhaust that effect. So I'm going to spend those military points to say, it's probably not the best strategy to be honest, but I'm kind of moving quite quickly here to show how the game works. We're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and of course we're taking debt, 5, 6 to boost that action to 6, in effect military points, which we're spending to shift spaces in Scotland or Ireland. So second turn, the French have gained full control of Scotland and Ireland. Yeah, and then they're doing that to set themselves up for the second half of the Jacobite Uprising card, which is once per turn on a different action round, you can spend 3 military points to score 1 VP for each French flagged such space.
So they've now got 4 of such bases. That's 4 victory points if they can spend 3 military points. And there are two tiles here that will enable them to do so. So that's what they're planning for the future. That is the French turn done.